Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. So, maybe a year ago, I read an article from Shane Parrish on Farnham Street, and it was called "The Work Required to Have an Opinion." And it's a great article. I'd recommend you read it. I recommend you share it. It's really excellent now more than ever, and it resonated with me in part because the title is so true. There is an amount of work that is required to have an opinion on something. The issue is the perceived amount of work that we think we need to have an opinion has gotten and lower, in my opinion. And we see this all the time on social media. One tweet can be enough for someone to feel empowered enough to have an opinion on something. Now, I can already hear people coming for me saying an opinion's an opinion. I'm not saying anything is an objective fact. It's actually by definition subjective. So what's the issue? Is this just how I feel, for example? And that's true. I think that's fine. And I do think that there needs to be a certain amount of grace in the public domain to allow us to play with ideas. But I don't think we have earned that grace in a lot of cases, for one. And for two, I don't think we do the work required to have that opinion, to be honest. And I think it just means that our opinions are really, really fragile and based on very fragile foundations. And that leads to the absolute cesspit that is the internet that we have right now. End of podcast. That's it. No, I do have other things to say. So, in the words required to have an opinion, Shane Parrish he speaks really eloquently about this. So I am going to quote directly. He says, "Doing the work required to hold an opinion means you can argue against yourself better than others. Only then you can say, I can hold this view because I can't find anyone else who can argue better against my view." I have thought about this before. I think I thought about it in the context of teaching, where when I was at school anyway, we'd have debates, and it was the classic uniform or no uniform debate. And the idea is you can get so deep in the weeds of the side that you've been assigned to that you actually can't see the other person's point of view. And that's a pretty crude example. But in the public domain, it can be very difficult to see the other person's point of view because your point of view is not only your point of view, but it's literally the way you see the world. It's your law. And I think it's a useful exercise to actually try to argue the other side of the coin. Now, I love to talk about this in sport because sport is one very specific domain where people hold really, really strong beliefs about something that actually does not matter. And we can all pretty much concede the fact that it doesn't matter, right? So when it comes to rugby, I am a Harlequins fan, very loosely, but I'm a Quins fan. If I tried to argue that Bristol Bears has more heritage or is a better team or something, then I could try to do that. I could look into it and I could read the same law as Bristol Bears fans do. This is a terrible example. Let me think of another one. If I tried to say that Harry Potter is the absolute best franchise of all time, full stop. It's the best franchise of all time. And that's my belief, which actually isn't too far from the truth. And then someone else said, actually, the Dark Knight trilogy is the best franchise of all time. I could then try and get into the mind of that person, the opposition in this debate, and try to argue their point better than they can. And if I still hold my opinion about Harry Potter, then so be it. That's an example of me doing work to have that opinion. If I can argue your point better than you'd ever be able to, and I know all the facts and I've gone down all the different resources and stuff, then I've done the work required to have my own opinion. If I can argue the opposition's point of view better than anyone on the opposition can, right? So I just thought that was a really useful way of looking at things. And actually, if you're not willing to do the work, that work required to have that opinion, then is it an opinion that you hold as closely as you think you do? Or a lot? Are you just arguing for the sake of arguing? Or do you actually hold that opinion quite closely? There's a phrase that goes around strong opinions loosely held or something like that. It's a fair enough thing, and I think it's important. It's more important to hold an opinion loosely than to have a strong one, because we should all be willing to change our opinion with new information. Otherwise, the malleability of our brains and of life and the constant growth that we're going through, we kind of undermine that if we say we know the absolute fact and nothing can change our opinions on it. Shane Parrish continues, you have to listen and chase down arguments that contradict your views. You have to think about how you might be fooling yourself. You have to see the issue from multiple perspectives. This is just echoing what I've already said. A lot of the time, when there is an issue, we only have one perspective of it, which is our own. But to be honest, if studying history has taught me anything, there are multiple different perspectives from any one issue. Now, it can be difficult to chase down other perspectives because the perspectives that you hold, for one, can be very widely held in your close circles or in your country or just in the world globally. It can also be seen as the correct, in inverted commas, view to have, again, in any domain. But I don't think that should stop us from trying to see things from multiple perspectives. And we're not trying to change our minds here. We're just trying to understand another perspective to strengthen our own opinion. It's the whole thing where if you need to silence someone with another opinion, is your opinion actually that strong? Because you should be able to like out argue someone if your opinion's so good. If your opinion's that good, it should be as easy as stating it and then just moving on with your life. If someone says 2 + 2 is 5, and I say it's 4, I don't need to silence that person. I just need to say it's 4. Do you know what I mean? Like, just a bit of stream of consciousness there. Shane Parrish goes on. Anyone can ignore information that doesn't support their view, but few can develop the intellectual honesty to change their beliefs when the evidence demands it. Now, this is really key because there are a lot of people out on the internet, there are a lot of accounts, there's a lot of tweets, there's a lot of whatever that might be factually correct, but they are intellectually dishonest. And I think that's really, really important to point out. Just because there are some facts that are correct doesn't mean that it's an honest account of what's happened, because a fact doesn't necessarily take into account context. In fact, facts can be manipulated in certain contexts to argue a certain point. So, and our context is our own brains or our own beliefs or our own past or our own traumas or our own history or the way that we've grown up or who's around us. That's all the context that we live in that you can't change. So it's actually intellectually dishonest to hold a very, very strong, tightly held opinion without exploring what other opinions there are about that thing, because we should explore the context of the thing and not just appropriate it to our own lives. When you think about it, it's actually quite entitled to just have your opinion and to not explore other ones. If anything, exploring other ones should strengthen your opinion or should strengthen our opinions. Finally, Parrish says, one way I handle people with strong opinions on everything is to ask them to write out their thoughts. This works for 3 reasons. First, most won't, which saves me a lot of time. Second, if they take the time to write it out, fuzzy thinking has nowhere to hide. Writing requires you to rigorously lay out your logic, step by step. Poor thinking quickly becomes obvious. Finally, when I can see their reasoning, it makes it easier to see where mine might be wrong. So it's taking the person's opinion through a rigorous process, with the end objective of taking, in the case of Parish, his own thinking and opinion through a rigorous process as well. If both ideas are going through a rigorous process, then the overall understanding and the overall ecosystem just becomes stronger. And recently, I remembered this article because I was speaking to a friend and we were just talking about how there are a lot of people who have opinions on their lives, who have opinions on our lives and what we need. And it's just like, oh, this is just the way that I feel. And I think it's really important that we spend time with ourselves to understand why we feel that way. And this is just like my own 2 cents. I'm a big proponent of journaling and of being with yourself and getting out in nature and spending time with yourself and reconnecting with yourself and all this stuff. I think it's really important. And I think if we don't do that, if we don't take the time to do that, or to even spending time with friends or speaking to people and speaking to people about how we actually feel, and if we don't do that, then we can feel a certain way, but we haven't necessarily done the work required to earn the right to feel that way. You can feel however you want. That's fine. But there should be a certain amount of work that you do to have the opinion of this shouldn't be the way things are. I don't think it's right to just concede, I feel like this and that's it. And I need other people to change how they're feeling to around me. Obviously, friends, family, colleagues, whatever, we can all put our arms around each other, and I think that we should. There should be a level of interdependence in our circles. But at the same time, we need to want to help ourselves, and we need to do the work within ourselves to figure out what that looks like and how we can do better, I think. And a lot of the time, that work is actually something which is quite a nice thing to do. It's become more and more difficult to do that. Society and closeness is kind of being eroded. It's becoming more difficult to go outside and see people now, and people aren't socializing as much and speaking as much, but also we're not connecting with ourselves as much. I don't think. Just my opinion. Um, and I have done some work to have this opinion because, on the other hand, we're more connected than we've ever been through social media. But I think that creates more emotional distance between us. That's my conclusion of that. So that last bit is just to say, I think there is a certain amount of work that's required to have an opinion of ourselves, of what it is that we deserve, of what it is that's going on in our lives. And the work that's required is just to check in with ourselves and to check in with each other. And new challenges require new solutions. And I think the erosion of society is a fairly new challenge, or the society that we've got in the contemporary space in modern times is it comes with its own challenges. So we need to come with our own solutions as well. And I think one of those solutions is to do the work, to have an opinion on the way things are, and then to move forward with that. I think there is a lot of work required to have opinions. And I think we have very strong opinions, very tightly held, but not very well justified. I think they're very fuzzy. And then as I'm saying this, I think there are a lot of opinions that I've got that could also be quite fuzzy. And I'm actively trying to do the work to rectify that. And this is just a means of sharing that with the great people. And that's it. That's it for today. Once again, thank you very much for listening. Go and read Shane Parrish's article titled The Work Required to Have an Opinion. It's on Farnham Street. It's excellent. If you think anyone would find this episode, this message useful, please share it with them. Please let me know what you think of this episode or of By Design in general. I'd really appreciate any and all feedback. And if you're not already, please follow. I'm across YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I'm across it all. So yeah, let me know what you think. And thank you very much for the support. Thank you for listening. And I will see you on the next one.